While Mira sets up, just two brief comments. One of the things that we were discussing in the United States about teacher professionalism is the role of the teacher unions. That might be something to discuss at some point. I don't know what the situation in India is, but there's a criticism that teacher unions in the United States are too much focused on collective bargaining as opposed to teacher professionalism. But I'm not going to cut into your time, Mira, so we welcome our second presentation on teacher work and identity.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a wonderful privilege to be presenting here. I'm not projecting. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to an audience like this, where I see so many of my gurus sitting in front of me. My presentation, I have a paper, I don't have a presentation, and I'm going to read from this paper. My paper is titled Teachers' Work and Identity, A Case for Strengthening Knowledge Relations. So I'm going to be touching upon topics that we've been hearing about since morning. So I hope it's not so much of a repetition, but a continuation of the debate. And I also hope that I can contribute in terms of insights, in terms of new ways of connecting the themes that we've been talking about. In this paper, I locate the current crisis in teachers' work and identity in the context of market-led reform and restructuring. I review the current discourses on education as a discipline and our understanding of teaching as a profession and the implications of these for the nature of teachers' work and professional development. I draw upon recent research to discuss the impact of the changing notions of teachers' work and quality on issues of teacher identity and their knowledge base. Based on an understanding of the self in a moral framework, I argue for the conceptualization of an authentic knowledge base for teachers that validates their identity and experience and incorporates an ontology of value and action. So, I start with looking at the National Curriculum Framework for Teacher Education, 2009, which talks of preparing humane and professional teachers. While the notion of being humane can be understood within an ethic of care, Nording's 2002, which is very often held up as an ideal by teachers, the notion of professional has been a highly contested one in the history of teaching, as Professor McLaughlin just pointed out. It would be useful to locate this debate in the context of changes taking place in education in this country, which is in many ways consistent with the changes occurring world over towards making schools more efficient and outcome-oriented. An overwhelming body of literature from the so-called developed and developing countries unanimously conceptualize these changes within the broader framework of globalization and the hegemonic nature of the neoliberal regimes. This is particularly evident in specific actions at the national and global levels that are camouflaged under the language of efficiency, performativity, measurable outcomes, and quality. And here I quote Michael Apple, among others, Stephen Ball, and Krishna Kumar, 2011. So neoliberalism and education. So what is the connection? Neoliberalism that arose as an economic doctrine in the later half of the 20th century to become a widely adopted framework for social, political, and economic governance, works on the central idea of classical economics that a free market is an essential prerequisite for a free society. Neoliberalism has undeniable influence, is educated as distinct from merely trained. The allegiance to a specialized knowledge base and autonomy seem to stand out as a key defining characteristics of a professional. This, of course, is an ideal, evaluative rather, and not a sociological character learning. Lasky, Woods and Jeffries, Zambales, and so on. Given these factors, an understanding of teacher professionalism becomes all the more challenging. I will divide this broad concept following Kalgren and Kampf 1996 into three distinct aspects for further analysis. Number one, professional knowledge of teachers. What is it? How is it organized? And how can it be developed? Number two, professionalization of teachers, the process by which an occupation becomes a profession, including professional autonomy, long university education, control of the development of professional knowledge. And number three, teacher professionalism itself, mainly the quality of teachers' work. So looking at professional knowledge of teachers, it is established that a professional in any field enjoys a certain monopoly over a specified body of knowledge that forms the basis for certain obligations and privileges that she enjoys. This knowledge lies at the base of how the profession itself is defined, and to a large extent is also the source of the status that the profession occupies. The status of teachers in society has varied across time and cultures. We are, of course, familiar with the exalted status accorded to the teacher as guru in the Indian context, which many teachers use as a point of reference to this day. The guru in this tradition was the repository of all knowledge, the base of all knowledge, the base of which was predominantly scriptural, which only a select few had the privilege of accessing. There are, of course, contrasting conceptions. For example, Montaigne in his essay titled On the Schoolmaster's Learning talks of the contempt with which teachers were regarded in the Roman and Greek times. This contempt stemmed primarily from what was perceived as the need teachers had to debase themselves by having to peddle their knowledge in exchange for material gain. These traditional conceptions are no doubt discordant with modern value systems, and sure enough, the status accorded to the village schoolmaster in India eventually underwent change with the emergence of a bureaucratic system of education in the colonial period. Increased centralization and the resulting need for regulatory and monitoring mechanisms lessened teachers' engagement with curricular issues and allowed for the textbook culture to take over, as wonderfully captured by Krishna Kumar. This could arguably mark the point where de-intellectualization of teachers began, Wilson in Hartley and Whitehead. The question that remains then is, what is the source and body of professional knowledge that teachers should claim? This is inevitably connected with the status of education itself as a discipline. Basil Bernstein, as a sociologist of knowledge, has analyzed the status hierarchies of disciplines, Middleton 2008, and his concepts have been used by researchers, primarily Beck and Young, Moore and Muller, to further explain the contemporary processes in educational knowledge. For Bernstein, there are two types of knowledge structures, hierarchical and horizontal. Hierarchical knowledge structures, typified by natural sciences, progress through integration of knowledge propositions. Horizontal knowledge structures, on the other hand, are not unitary but plural and consist of a series of parallel, even incommensurable concepts that defy incorporation into a more general theory. Furthermore, the horizontal knowledge structures have weak verticality, that is, internal relations among ideas, as well as weak grammar, that is, external relation to data. By these criteria, educational knowledge could very well be characterized as having a segmented horizontal knowledge structure with a weak grammar. Bernstein did not hold out much hope for the growth of knowledge in education, as it lacked the verticality of the hierarchical knowledge structures, such as, for example, physics. Countering such a deficit view of the growth of knowledge in education, others, notably like Mate in 2010, have argued that the key to understanding knowledge structures in fields such as education is by recognizing that the cosmology of these modes of theorizing are less epistemological and more axiological. I hope I can return to this point a little later. It has also been argued, Sarangapani 2011, that education may be considered a meta-discipline due to the, and I quote, due to the interactions with the constituent disciplines, although it is this very nature of the discipline that weakens its structure, providing multiple points of entry into its discourse. The existence of a community of practice that enables the transmission of tacit knowledge, the ability to think through problems in a complex manner that reveals a complex epistemology, may lead one to regard education as a discipline, albeit one with a weak structure. There is also the familiar divide in education, as was pointed out to us by Professor Batra in the morning, the divide in education between theory and practice that has led to a deep disconnect that is experienced especially by student teachers between the disciplinary knowledge and classroom practice. Professionalization of teachers, the second aspect, is equally problematic. One challenge of being a teacher is navigating the pathways chartered by educational reformers, Stickney 2012. Unlike other professions where professionals have some autonomy and control over the development of professional knowledge in their respective fields, teachers do not enjoy the same autonomy or control. Historically, experts from outside the field of education with perhaps no background in teaching have decided these parameters. It has been argued that despite a perception of classroom and teaching as unchanging entities, aims and purposes of school education change with the changing society. One aspect of professional knowledge is also being able to lean on tradition and continuities in professional experience, which is denied to teachers, and for this reason, teaching profession has been described as a rupture profession, Calgren. In this rupture profession, where the experts decide to change the goals at regular intervals, there is constant change in teacher tasks and they are rendered without competencies in the new context. Finally, a move to the notion of teacher professionalism itself. The third aspect, the quality, which denotes quality in teachers' work or teacher professionalism, is the area that has received the greatest amount of attention, both in terms of policy and research. This is closely connected with the previous aspect in the sense that teachers are not considered sufficiently professionalized to determine the parameters of quality in their profession. As a result of this, there is a constant change in what constitutes quality in teachers' work, and it is determined by those outside the profession. Also, professionalism, which is the process of raising standards of a given profession, may often be contradictory to professionalization, which denotes the process of improving the status of the profession, Hargreaves 2000. Analysis of the notion of professionalism from a social critical perspective, Smith et al. 2000, have noted the rapid intensification of teachers' work in the name of professionalization of teaching. Among the processes that characterize what is being termed as a contemporary crisis in teachers' work are the damaging of the student-teacher relationship through the intrusion of the market and a subjugation of teachers' knowledge. Smith et al. Go so far as to term this experience of teachers as alienation, to describe their increasing powerlessness and negative feelings about the self. Studies of teachers' lives from the interactionist perspectives have also brought to light the everyday struggles of teachers who have to contend with the conflicting expectations from them, Middleton, Zembailes et al. While there is a demand for teachers to adapt to the changing social demands, there is a lack of recognition of the inherent conflict between the strictly professional and emotional demands on the teacher. It is evident that notions of quality in education change with the changing socio-cultural conditions. I'm just going to skip over that a little bit and just say that any discourse on teacher professionalism must begin to engage with authentic construction of what constitutes teacher professional knowledge. Moving on to the second segment of my paper, which is teacher identity. Teacher identity is admittedly a a pretty complex concept and a notion. The concept of identity itself has been a topic of many philosophical, sociological, and psychological explorations, but has eluded an easy definition. As for teacher identity, its importance for teacher education and development is acknowledged widely in literature, but there is very little convergence on its components, sources, and relationship with related issues. Teacher identity is viewed as being dynamic, almost organic in nature, conceived of as something that can be formed, shaped, and can shift according to the context. It is regarded as embodied, which is to say the construction of identity cannot be removed from the material conditions of teaching, but is seen as continuously negotiated through experience, Alsop 2006. It is at the same time consistent with the ideal or moral conceptions of teaching. One of the most significant aspects of identity, I think, is, however, the relationship with the self or the self-concept. While the moral aspect of the self-concept is widely recognized, what is probably overlooked or less evident is the sense of dignity that is inalienably linked to the moral aspect of the self. Earlier it was seen that theorizing in education can be regarded as being more axiological than epistemological, and this view is in consonance with the fact that for philosophers and thinkers, from Plato to Kant to Dewey, education has been regarded first and foremost as a moral act. And these moral aspects have clear implications for a conception of teacher's self. Following Taylor, Charles Taylor, 1992, any description of the self must acknowledge the extent to which understanding of the self is linked to an understanding of the good. Taylor's moral framework consists of three axes, namely respect for and obligation to others, understanding of what makes for a good life, and notions of dignity. If one were to apply this framework to teachers, it would be constituted by subjective notions of how a teacher might fulfill her respect for and obligation to her students, among others, her notion of what makes for a good teacher, and how, while accomplishing these, she might maintain her sense of dignity. As all moral frameworks are understood as fundamentally social, these notions too would be constituted essentially in a social context. The obvious question then is regarding the source of this identity or moral framework, and I argue here that it is the teacher's knowledge base. It is the systematic erosion of this knowledge base, or even the inadequate understanding of its constitution, that has contributed to the contemporary crisis in teaching referred to earlier. It has impacted teachers' work in deep ways. The curriculum, the forms of instruction, ways of working, ways of relating to pupils, how they are seen by others and by themselves. The challenges to teacher identities as professionals have been many, but I contend that the core of the challenge lies in the fact that the close connect between the knowledge base and identities has not been sufficiently acknowledged, and in fact, teachers are perceived to have no distinct knowledge base. There is equally disrespect for teachers in professional knowledge. It is seen as either non-existent or wrong. They should be doing not what they think they should be doing, but what they have been told is paradigmatically appropriate as determined by the latest set of goals and conditions for their work. Therefore, we see oversimplified solutions being offered to the problems in education that includes school choice initiatives, replacing or teacher-proofing classrooms, Henry Giroux, 2012. The method and aim of such packages is to legitimize what might be called market-driven management pedagogies, again Giroux. These rising trends of managerialism in education has led to trivialization of teachers' work and identity, wherein teachers are treated as resources to be developed and not as intellectual beings with agency and capacity to learn from experience. Krishna Kumar, 2011. Studies in different contexts have focused on teacher identity as one of the most complex and crucial aspects for research and find that teachers devise strategies to negotiate with the identities imposed from the outside. It has been found, particularly Sachs 2001, in response to the managerial professionalism imposed by the authorities, teachers form new professional identities that are often not in consonance with the imposed identity. Studies on the impact of educational restructuring on teacher identities find that the disintegration of self-identity from the social identity results in teachers having to engage in what is termed as identity work, Woods and Jeffrey 2002, to negotiate some consistency between the two. This identity work was found to be largely emotional work that required teachers to expend considerable amount of energies in forming, shaping, constructing, and reconstructing notions about themselves as teachers to keep up with the change in context, expectations from society, etc. The conflict between the role expectations ensuing from the restructuring and teachers' self-identities have led to the adoption of strategic instrumentalist identities. Studies have also shown that teacher autonomy and agency can play a pivotal role in professional learning so as to offset the negative policy impact, Boardman, Taylor and Morris and so on. As observed in the India Infrastructure Report, Batra 2012, teachers' voices are conspicuous by its absence in debates that impact them the most. The recommendation to relocate teacher education with the systems of higher education as a way to end the intellectual isolation of the teacher implicitly links the issue of teacher agency with the strengthening of their intellectual standing. What is being emphasized here is the urgent need to address issues of teacher professionalism and identity that have the potential to impact the very reform agendas. I will now briefly return, and I'm treading very thin ground here because these are thoughts that I have not fully thought through, and I would appreciate your comments on these. I will briefly return to a reference I made earlier to the nature of educational knowledge. So if we are to engage productively with the creation of an authentic knowledge base for teachers, that would be the foundation of the creation of their selves, it is important to acknowledge that teachers construct their knowledge in action and within a value-laden framework. The notion of disembodied knowledge has a long tradition in Western philosophy that locates value outside the human realm. The self turns inward more and more till such a stage where mental states are located within a so-called inner space far removed from the realm of action. This Cartesian disengagement and rationality employed to remove the subjective experience from thinking about the natural world becomes extended to the concept of the self as well. Sensory and other experiences of the world must now be subject to the strict control of reasoning. This move towards the interiority is in a manner the objectification of all things external, including the body. Unsurprisingly, this move parallels the triumph of objective knowledge of the natural sciences as the mode of true knowledge. I submit, therefore, that the task of building an authentic knowledge base of teachers is an ontological one that necessarily integrates value and action. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes.
Madam, thank you very much for your nice explanation. I'm personally very much worried about the issue of the identity of the teachers, because I think that teacher is suffering from the identity crisis nowadays. Ideally speaking, we believe that teacher has to be independent thinker and a good philosopher. All good philosophers are good teachers and vice versa. But actually we see that teacher is not turning to be independent thinker. He is becoming slave very much dependent on the society. He is the slave of the traditional society. He has never the courage of going against the stream and thinking independently. That's one thing. And I do also think that, regarding the issues that, once again, the teacher's philosophy or the teacher's his own thinking, what he thinks about, he never has that courage to put upon his ideas on the society. Whatever happens is, the flow of current, the time, the flows against the all these issues, and the teacher is always found to be as a puppet, and the society makes him dance like. Similarly, teacher is supposed to be given we only say that the society gives the respect to the teacher. Actually, I do think that it is only false respect. It is society is also having the double standards. So teacher is giving he is given the false respect, and inwardly we never find that he is getting the real respect, as once upon a time in the ancient times, especially in Indian philosophy, rishis and all gurus were to get great respect from. Even kings used to bow down before them. But now it's not the case. The respect that politicians are getting, the scientists are getting, the policemen are getting, administrators are getting, rich people are getting, do we really think that teacher is getting that respect? So teacher is, he is satisfying his own mind that I am a very great person and society is giving respect to me. So this is the identity crisis. I would like your comment on this, madam, please.
You want to wait?
Yeah, I will wait.
I don't want to add yet another concept to the rich array of concepts you've already illustrated in your talk, but it links to something the last speaker said in terms of respect for teachers. And part of the identity of teachers relates to the authority to teach. What is the authority to teach? What is the source of that authority? The teacher can't be expected to renew that authority each time they go into the classroom. They have the right, if you like, to expect their instructions, their requests to be heeded. They have the right that parents also take note of what recommendations concerning children. But the teacher authority is something that is problematic. It's problematic, for example, if the source of authority to educate is actually seen to lie with parents. That can undermine teacher authority. Teacher authority can also be undermined if teachers are simply seen as agents of the state. And despite what the previous speaker said, teacher authority can also be undermined if they are merely seen as service providers. Because being a service provider gives the locus of authority, the source of authority, in the service user. So I just want to suggest that somewhere in your mix of teacher identity there needs to be made room, I would suggest, respectfully, for this notion of authority, which is a difficult concept, and it really comes from philosophy rather than sociology.
So, thank you for a nice presentation covering, I think, a range of ideas. So, I sort of understand that you're arguing that there's some kind of a problem or crisis, if you like, with the question of teacher identity and the place or the status of a teacher in our education system. So, I mean, what happens to some of the arguments that you're making if you take a sort of historical view? If you look at how the teacher's position and status and so on has changed, say, over the last 100 years. I mean, I'm not talking about the ancient age of the rishis and so on, but just about, from British times or from the time of Phule. So, what does that say about some of the arguments or the explanations that we are advancing for the changing role or status of the teacher. For instance, we know that the society is going through enormous social change, and education is a part of that. And that the number of children coming into schools is enormously more than even it was 30 years ago, both on account of the increase in the number of people as well as the number of children coming into schools. I mean, this is, so what does this do to change in teacher status and identity? What does it also do to, if you feel that the teacher's knowledge is an important constituent or an important foundation for teacher identity, then has this changed in the last 50 years? Why has it changed? Why would it need to change? I think these are some questions which might be interesting to answer.
Okay. She's waiting for more questions.
Or I can respond to the ones that I have. The first, I think, comment, I think it's somewhat connected with the historical perspective that you were urging me to consider. I, of course, have to think more deeply on why is it or what kind of an impact has these changes, the social-cultural changes, have had on the ways in which teachers construct their identities in terms of their knowledge relations. So I definitely need to think more deeply on that. But in terms, just as a quick response, I think there is not enough understanding of teachers' lives from the Indian context. What we have is extremely sketchy. We have some understanding of the ways in which teachers work has become intellectualized since colonial times, and these tendencies have become deeply, perhaps even perpetuated in the times since. So, as Professor Batra was referring to in the morning, I think we haven't yet formulated a coherent debate on identifying this kind of a knowledge base that teachers can claim as their own. So the ways in which student learning has been constituted through NCF and subsequent reforms, a similar move is yet to happen for teachers' knowledge base in India, I think. So that is one response that I have, but I think this historical analysis and looking at how it has impacted the changes that have happened, I think it will be a very important and interesting exercise. The other, yes, thank you for pointing out the notion of authority. That is something that I had not included in my framework. I think authority is probably even more problematic than autonomy, if anything. Teachers can still claim some sense of autonomy, at least within their classrooms and within their immediate areas of operation, but authority is something is probably, and you're right, teachers are perhaps seen as agents of the state in more cases. But it would be extremely important to include these notions as well in any broad conceptualization about teachers' identity as well. So thank you for that. I think that's about it.
I think somewhat related, I think, is there a strategy, to really, in these days you hardly see, people are saying that philosophers used to become teachers. So what is what would be the, motive for 21st century people, the best people, to really move to teaching profession? I'm sure it's related to identity and many other things. So is there a strategy which would help the best people, thinking people, the philosophers, to get into teaching profession?
I wouldn't venture to answer that question. I think the answer lies with
Can I throw in a question?
better minds here in front of me.
Can I throw in a question? When you talk about knowledge, or when we talk about knowledge, we usually think about explicit knowledge, or knowledge that is codifiable and explicable. But there's an argument that there are, important parts of professional knowledge are tacit. In other words, they can't be codified, and they can only become manifest in concrete situations. If that is so, then we would have to adapt the teacher preparation process to that part, that characteristic of tacit knowledge. What's your thought on that?
I think that's precisely the conceptualization that I'm attempting. I think the ways in which the construction of knowledge which has been modeled on the natural sciences has systematically removed the subjective experience or the rationalization of the ways of thinking and the ways of conceptualizing knowledge as a disembodied concept is, I think, what you have referred to. So I am arguing for a knowledge that encompasses both action and a value framework.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I think we want to thank our two speakers very much and prepare for tea. Thank you.